It began before dawn on July 9, 1943. Under the cover of a violent Mediterranean storm, a small American submarine, the USS Shad, rose briefly to the surface just 5 miles off the southern coast of Sicily. On board was a 6-man team from the newly formed Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, America's first intelligence agency. Their mission: land undetected near Licata and prepare the ground for the Allied invasion, Operation Husky. Within 48 hours, they would vanish without a trace. The team called themselves Echo Mission. It consisted of 2 officers and 4 enlisted men: Captain Richard "Rick" Mason, a veteran of North Africa; Lieutenant Alan Brooks, a cryptographer fluent in Italian; Sergeant Henry Cole, an explosives expert; Corporal David Levin, a radio operator; and 2 Sicilian-American interpreters recruited for their local dialects. Their orders were to infiltrate enemy-held territory, contact anti-fascist locals, and report on German troop movements along the coastal roads between Licata and Agrigento. The storm was supposed to be their ally, masking the sound of their landing craft and scattering Axis patrols, but instead, it became their first enemy. Waves slammed against the rubber boat as they fought to reach the shore. In Mason's field journal, later recovered in fragments, he wrote, "We landed under thunder. No lights, no response from shore contact. The sea nearly took us before the enemy could." That line, dated July 10, was the last confirmed record of the Echo team's existence. By sunrise, Allied paratroopers of the U.S. 82nd Airborne were dropping inland, and the first landing craft from General Patton's 7th Army were closing in on the beaches. But Mason's men were already behind enemy lines, moving toward the inland hills where German units from the Hermann Göring Division had been seen repositioning. Their radio was supposed to signal a simple code phrase, "Harvest Green," to confirm safe landing. It never came. Hours passed. Then days. Back aboard the Shad, the sub's crew waited for a second transmission that never arrived. The OSS liaison officer aboard the invasion fleet grew anxious. Reports of strong German counterattacks near Gela complicated any rescue effort. With the invasion's success hanging in the balance, Echo Mission was marked as unconfirmed contact. A coded message was sent to Allied Command, EM Silent, presumed compromised or inoperative. For the men on the ground, the environment itself was hostile. Sicily's rugged hills and dry plains offered little cover. Axis patrols were sweeping villages in search of partisans, and locals were torn between fear and survival. Mason's team was ordered to avoid direct contact until they established their signal. But isolation, hunger, and uncertainty wore on them quickly. One interpreter's notebook, later found in an abandoned farmhouse, read, "We can hear artillery at night, but no reply from our own. Brooks says we are ghosts now." What made the mission especially dangerous was its timing. Operation Husky relied heavily on deception, false radio traffic, dummy paratrooper drops, and misinformation planted through double agents. The OSS had deployed several small reconnaissance teams to feed the illusion that Allied forces would strike at multiple points. If any one of these units were captured, the entire deception plan risked collapse. Echo Mission's silence therefore wasn't just a tragedy, it was a potential threat to the entire Allied operation. Back in North Africa, OSS planners debated whether the team had drowned during the storm or fallen into enemy hands. Some officers believed the group had been captured and possibly turned by German intelligence. Others suggested they may have chosen to go dark deliberately, maintaining silence to protect themselves or their mission. A British officer later remarked in his diary, "It is a grim lesson in the limits of secrecy. Sometimes silence is the only sound left of a mission gone wrong." What remains remarkable is how quickly their disappearance was buried under layers of operational necessity. With thousands of men fighting and dying across Sicily, a handful of missing spies were just another classified line item in a chaotic campaign. Yet, in the intelligence community, their loss echoed like a ghost transmission, a missing signal from behind enemy lines that no one could fully explain. Today, historians can still trace the coordinates of their intended landing zone, near Punta Bianca, a quiet stretch of limestone cliffs now known for its pristine waters. There, under the waves, divers have found fragments of a rubber boat and rusted weapons matching OSS issue from 1943. But no remains, No personal effects, no evidence of capture. Just silence and sea. The mystery of Echo Mission begins there, in a storm, under fire, somewhere between courage and disappearance. As Allied troops pushed inland and the island began to fall, one question lingered in every intelligence briefing. What happened to the men who were supposed to light the path before them? The answer would lead investigators down a trail of intercepted messages, false leads, and a web of wartime secrecy that would only deepen as the campaign continued. By mid-July 1943, the guns of Operation Husky thundered across Sicily, and the island's southern coast was firmly in Allied hands. But inside the newly established OSS field office in Palermo, one case consumed the attention of analysts and commanders alike: the disappearance of Echo Mission. It had been over a week since their landing near Licata, and no word had surfaced. Then, a single German Enigma intercept changed everything. The message, decrypted by British codebreakers at Bletchley Park, referred to the capture of American saboteurs near Agrigento. The reference was vague, no unit numbers, no names, but the timing matched Echo Mission's deployment. Major Kenneth Dowling, the OSS liaison to British intelligence, immediately flagged the report. Yet, when Allied forces reached Agrigento days later, there were no prisoners, no bodies, and no German paperwork confirming the arrest. The trail was cold before it even began. Dowling's report to Washington summarized it grimly: possible capture of OSS unit. No confirmation. Enemy forces appear to have moved personnel inland before retreat. In truth, he suspected something darker. Rumors began to circulate that one of the local contacts, a Sicilian smuggler named Vittorio Alessi, had betrayed the team. Alessi had been vetted by the British Special Operations Executive, SOE, as a reliable informant, but his loyalties were notoriously fluid. Some said he had switched sides more than once, selling intelligence to whoever held the upper hand. Meanwhile, American troops of the 3rd Infantry Division discovered abandoned German field positions near Nero, where fragments of American radio equipment were found, charred and smashed. The serial numbers matched OSS issue. Lieutenant Brooks's coded notebook was recovered nearby, its last entry half-burned but legible: signals jammed. Locals warn of black trucks, moving east at night. That clue suggested German counterintelligence units, possibly from the Abwehr, had been operating in the region longer than the Allies realized. To the soldiers in the field, the war in Sicily was brutal but straightforward: advance, take ground, push north. For the intelligence officers, it was a labyrinth of whispers and shadows. The OSS and SOE competed for local assets, often unaware of each other's operations. The British distrusted the Americans' relative inexperience. The Americans resented the British for withholding key information. The result was confusion, duplication, and, in Echo Mission's case, potentially fatal gaps in coordination. One SOE field officer later wrote in his after-action report, "We played the same game on the same board but never agreed on the rules." Men like Mason were the pieces sacrificed to miscommunication. The quote would not be declassified until the 1970s, long after the files had been stamped, "Case closed." Adding to the mystery, Allied intelligence began to intercept fragments of German chatter suggesting the existence of a counterintelligence operation known as Silbernetz, the Silver Net. Its purpose: to capture or neutralize enemy agents operating behind Axis lines. Whether Echo Mission had stumbled into this trap by chance or design was unclear, but it explained why their equipment was destroyed rather than confiscated. The Germans wanted to erase all trace of them. Inside the OSS camp in Palermo, Dowling called for a meeting with his British counterpart, Captain Peter Ashford. Their exchange, recorded in Dowling's field notes, was tense. "Dowling, your informants had Alessi under watch. He vanishes the same night our team does. Coincidence?" Ashford: "Coincidences are common in war, Major. Especially when both our agencies send men into the same valley without talking about it." Dowling: "That valley cost me 6 Americans. Ashford: "Or 1 traitor. Pick your story carefully." The argument revealed the heart of the issue: trust. Even among allies, secrecy was currency. And when missions went silent, everyone assumed betrayal. For modern observers, The story of Echo Mission offers a lesson in how intelligence work often collapses under its own secrecy. Communication, or the lack of it, was as deadly as any enemy bullet. The Allies were learning, painfully, that the war behind the lines could be as costly as the one fought in daylight. But for those in 1943, there was no time for reflection. The invasion pressed northward toward Messina. Every day that passed without news of Echo Mission made it less likely they had survived. Yet, just as the case was about to be archived, a report came in from a village north of Agrigento. A farmer claimed to have seen foreign soldiers being led away by German troops into the mountains near Enna. The men were described as wearing uniforms without insignia, their hands bound but their heads held high. The OSS dispatched a reconnaissance unit to verify the claim. They found traces of a temporary German encampment, discarded ration tins, empty fuel drums, and footprints leading toward the interior hills. Nothing more. But it was enough to rekindle the hunt. As the chapter of Sicily's invasion began to close, the mystery deepened. The Allies had won the ground war, but in the shadows, another battle raged. One of deception, betrayal, and vanished men whose mission was never meant to exist. The silence around Echo Mission was no longer seen as mere loss. It was becoming a dangerous secret someone wanted to stay buried. By early August 1943, the Allied front line was advancing rapidly through central Sicily. The towns of Enna and Troina, perched high in the mountains, had become key strategic targets. Yet behind the shifting battle lines, the OSS investigation into Echo Mission pressed on quietly, following a faint trail of rumors, coded fragments, and a single eyewitness account from a frightened Sicilian farmer. The farmer, whose name was later recorded as Giuseppe Marino, claimed he had seen 6 Americans, their hands tied, led by Germans through the olive groves near the village of Calasabetta. When questioned by British officers, he described their uniforms with uncanny accuracy: khaki fatigues, light packs, no visible insignia. But what unsettled the investigators most was his mention of a local guide walking ahead of them, someone speaking Italian with a Sicilian accent. That detail reopened the theory of betrayal. OSS Major Kenneth Dowling authorized a field team to retrace the route described by Marino. Traveling with a squad from the U.S. 9th Infantry Division, they swept through abandoned German positions in the hills. There, in a small ravine near an abandoned shepherd's hut, they found evidence: a torn map with hand-drawn notes in English, and beside it, a broken radio transmitter marked U.S. Signal Corps, 1943. The call sign etched into the metal plate read E.M-3, the same identifier assigned to Echo Mission's communications officer, Corporal David Levin. The find was significant but puzzling. The radio was damaged beyond repair, likely by explosives. There were signs of a brief struggle: spent 9mm casings, boot prints, and scattered food tins. Yet there were no bodies. Dowling recorded in his field notes evidence of contact, probable engagement. No confirmation of fatalities. Direction of movement: northeast toward Enna. As the search parties pressed on, reports filtered in of German motor columns moving prisoners toward the interior. Allied air reconnaissance was tasked with scanning the narrow roads between Enna and Troina, but constant cloud cover and the rugged terrain made it nearly impossible to spot anything conclusive. Dowling's frustration grew with each dead lead. He wrote in a private note never intended for official records, "It's as though we're chasing ghosts. Every answer gives birth to 2 more questions." At the same time, another discovery complicated the story. A British SOE team operating independently in the same region found coded messages hidden in a church bell tower in Enna. The cipher key matched the pattern used by OSS field agents. This suggested that at least one member of Echo Mission may have survived long enough to continue transmitting, or that their codes had fallen into enemy hands. The possibility chilled everyone involved. The conflicting evidence, burned radios, hidden codes, eyewitness reports, pointed to multiple explanations. Perhaps Mason's team had been captured and executed. Or perhaps they had deliberately destroyed their equipment to avoid detection while operating under a false flag. There was even speculation that the Germans themselves had planted the evidence to confuse Allied intelligence. One OSS analyst later remarked, "We were fighting a war of mirrors." Nothing was certain, and every shadow could be a reflection of our own making. That observation, drawn from his post-war memoir, captures the psychological strain of the hunt for Echo Mission. For the men in Dowling's office, each clue felt like a step closer to the truth, but also deeper into an intentional maze. The search culminated in a chilling discovery near the mountain road to Troina. Inside a half-collapsed barn, soldiers found a leather-bound notebook sealed inside a ration tin. The first page bore the initials A.B., Lieutenant Alan Brooks. Its entries were short, coded, and desperate. The final readable line read, "We move at night. Locals untrustworthy. If this is found, tell them we tried." No further entries followed. Dowling sent the notebook to OSS headquarters in Algiers under high security. There, cryptographers spent weeks analyzing the shorthand. Several passages hinted at contact with an Italian resistance group that may have been infiltrated by fascist informants. One encoded message read simply, "Silver Net Closing." This was the first time the OSS had seen that name appear in their own field materials. Could it be that the Germans' Operation Silbernetz had indeed ensnared the Echo team? Or was Brooks using the phrase to describe something else, a warning of betrayal from within? The meaning was unclear, but the effect was chilling. Whatever Silvernet was, it was closing fast. For modern historians, this chapter of the Echo Mission story illustrates how the fog of war often obscured even the most basic truths. In a campaign where both sides ran secret operations, misinformation became a weapon as lethal as bullets. In Sicily's hills, the front lines of espionage and survival blurred beyond recognition. As Dowling's men packed up their findings and prepared to return to Palermo, a final discovery was made near the site, a rusted German identification tag bearing no name, only a number, 2764/ABW. West, an Abwehr Field Unit designation. That single clue suggested the presence of German counterintelligence officers operating far closer to the Allied advance than previously believed. The evidence was stacking up, but the picture was becoming darker, not clearer. If Echo Mission had fallen into enemy hands, they might have carried with them not only intelligence on troop movements, but the keys to Allied deception plans. Dowling closed his report that night with one sentence: "If they are alive, they are in the net. If they are dead, the net still holds them." As August 1943 drew to a close, Allied forces tightened their grip on Sicily. The German retreat toward Messina was nearly complete, and the island's liberation seemed all but certain. Yet, amid the victory reports and strategic briefings, a new discovery sent ripples through the intelligence community. In a captured German command post outside Caltanissetta, British SOE officers uncovered a metal crate labeled Abwehr Abteilung II, Operation Silbernetz. Inside were fragments of field reports, interrogation logs, and cipher pads that hinted at a systematic German campaign to trap Allied agents. Among the scattered papers was a reference to 6 enemy operatives captured in early July, matching the timeline of Echo Mission. Major Kenneth Dowling of the OSS was flown from Palermo to review the documents firsthand. The files painted a chilling picture. Operation Silbernetz, or Silvernet, was a counterintelligence program initiated by the Abwehr's Western Europe branch in early 1943. Its objective was to feed false intelligence to Allied spies through compromised Italian contacts and then ambush any incoming reconnaissance teams. The Abwehr officers had studied OSS and SOE tactics meticulously, mapping likely infiltration points along the southern coast, Licata, Gela, and Agrigento among them. In the margins of one report, an officer had scrawled, "EM detected, net successful." But there was something odd about the records. The supposed interrogation summaries of captured Americans contained inconsistencies, different dates, mismatched ranks, even contradictions in physical descriptions. One entry listed Lieutenant Brooks, age 34, while OSS records confirmed he was only 28. Dowling began to suspect that the reports were part of a cover-up, either to hide the agent's real fate or to mislead Allied intelligence. When Dowling cross-checked the German documents with SOE archives, a disturbing connection surfaced. Several Sicilian informants, including Vittorio Alessi, the smuggler suspected of betraying the Echo team, appeared in both OSS and SOE files. British intelligence had once used him to pass false invasion details to Axis forces. It was possible, Dowling realized, that Alesi was playing both sides simultaneously, luring Allied agents into German traps under the guise of cooperation. During an internal briefing, a British officer cautioned, "We built an empire of shadows here, Major. It's difficult to know which shadow belongs to whom." That single remark summarized the war's invisible front, a contest of lies, half-truths, and expendable men. Dowling's investigation then led to another shocking clue. Among the captured WWII documents was a telegram dated July 12, 2 days after Echo Mission's disappearance, ordering that all captured agents be transferred under Italian custody per Directive 47. But no Italian prison records from the period showed any such transfer. In fact, Italian Carabinieri reports for that week listed 0 foreign prisoners in the region. It appeared that the captured men, if they were truly captured, never reached official custody. Meanwhile, the Allied advance unearthed further evidence. Near a bombed-out villa outside Enna, soldiers found a makeshift radio room hastily abandoned by retreating German troops. On the table lay a coded transmission in German, half-burned, which read, "Silver net compromised, orders to terminate." The implication was clear. The Germans, fearing their network had been exposed, may have executed the agents to erase evidence. But no graves, no remains, and no eyewitnesses were ever found. Some historians believe the Germans' termination order was never carried out. Others argue that the phrase terminate referred not to people, but to the operation itself, a shutdown of Silbernets to conceal its existence from the approaching Allies. Dowling, ever cautious, refused to speculate. Instead, he compiled what he called the Palermo Dossier, a classified report outlining the entire sequence of events. It concluded, Operation Silbernets demonstrates a level of German-Italian cooperation not previously documented. Echo mission casualties unconfirmed. Possible intelligence compromise, high. In post-war analysis, that report would become a cornerstone for understanding Axis counterintelligence during the Mediterranean campaign. Yet even within the document, Dowling left one haunting note scribbled in pencil at the margin. Records suggest a third hand. Unclear if German or Italian. Possibly internal. The phrase hinted at something even more disturbing, a mole or double agent within the Allied intelligence apparatus itself. The idea wasn't far-fetched. Both the OSS and SOE were riddled with divided loyalties and infiltration risks. Italian fascist sympathizers and opportunists often switched sides multiple times, feeding selective truths for profit or survival. In the chaos of 1943 Sicily, truth itself had become a casualty of war. As Allied operations shifted north toward mainland Italy, interest in the Echo mission case began to wane. There were new invasions to plan, new intelligence priorities to chase. Yet Dowling couldn't let go. He ordered the captured Silbernets files shipped to Washington under sealed cover, with a personal note attached, pending further investigation. The line between capture and cooperation remains unresolved. Decades later, when fragments of these documents were finally declassified, researchers noticed entire pages redacted with thick black ink, particularly those referencing Operation Torchlight, a name never mentioned in wartime records but eerily linked to the Echo mission timeline. Whatever the connection, it marked a turning point. What began as a missing persons case was evolving into a much larger mystery, one that pointed to hidden motives, buried alliances, and a secret operation that might have reached far beyond the Sicilian coast. And still, after months of searching, not a single trace of the 6 men from Echo mission had ever been found. By late August 1943, the guns fell silent across Sicily. The island was in Allied hands, its beaches secured, its towns liberated. But in the intelligence corridors of Palermo and Algiers, the war was far from over. For Major Kenneth Dowling and his OSS colleagues, the mystery of Echo mission had turned from an operational concern into an obsession. The men were gone, their equipment scattered, their traces faint, but the questions surrounding their disappearance were multiplying faster than answers. The war diaries of the U.S. 7th Army noted their loss in a single line: OSS detachment, unaccounted for, presumed captured. Yet, no record of capture, interrogation, or execution had ever surfaced in any German or Italian archive. It was as if the six-man team had been erased from history. Then came a discovery that reopened the case in the most unexpected way. Near Troina, where fierce fighting had taken place only weeks earlier, a U.S. Army engineer clearing mines stumbled upon a small set of personal effects half buried in the mud. Among them was a rusted dog tag inscribed, Sergeant Henry Cole, 32458921, U.S. Army. Cole had been the explosives expert of the Echo team. The tag was bent and charred, suggesting it had been through an explosion or fire. Nearby, searchers found the remains of burned documents, mostly illegible, but one fragment contained a partial header, OSS, Operation Torchlight. The word torchlight set off alarms. No such mission was listed in OSS field records. In fact, the name didn't appear in any Allied operation logs in the Mediterranean theater. Dowling ordered immediate cross-referencing. Within 48 hours, Washington cabled a terse reply, cease further inquiry into referenced operation. File under EM, non-operational. That was all. No clarification, no follow-up. The order came directly from OSS Deputy Director Alan Dulles himself. Dowling was furious. To him, the instruction was a clear attempt to bury the truth. In his private journal, later found among declassified archives, he wrote, Washington would rather erase the men than admit the mission. Whatever Torchlight was, Echo mission became its casualty. His superiors offered little comfort. Officially, the OSS declared the unit missing in action, presumed lost during infiltration. Unofficially, whispers circulated that the team's real task had not been reconnaissance at all, but negotiation. Some historians later uncovered evidence that lends weight to that theory. In July 1943, just before the Allied landings, secret back-channel efforts had been made between U.S. intelligence officers and elements of the Italian military seeking to surrender early. These contacts were dangerous, sensitive, and strictly deniable. It is now believed that Echo mission may have carried documents or messages meant for Italian officers in Sicily willing to switch sides, a covert diplomatic exchange conducted under the fog of war. If that was true, it would explain the extraordinary level of secrecy surrounding their disappearance. A former OSS cryptographer, interviewed in 1965, hinted at such a possibility. There were missions within missions. Sometimes, even the men in the field didn't know who they were really working for. The cryptographer's words, though unverifiable, align eerily with the evidence. It also explains the redacted pages in the Palermo dossier, which repeatedly referenced Torchlight correspondence without elaboration. Meanwhile, soldiers who fought in the Troina sector remembered rumors of German patrols executing American officers around the same time. One Sicilian partisan claimed to have seen Allied uniforms burned in a ravine outside Cerami. Yet, when investigators arrived, all that remained were ashes and fragments of webbing straps. No remains were recovered. No proof, only whispers. For the men of the OSS, the silence from Washington was as painful as any loss. Sergeant Cole's recovered tag was returned to his family in Kansas City with a brief letter. He served bravely in Special Operations, Sicily, 1943. Mission classified. No mention of the others. No mention of how or why he died. In the aftermath, Dowling's investigation was quietly shut down. All files relating to Echo mission were sealed under confidential Mediterranean operations. Even within the OSS, access was restricted. Only a small note appended to the end of the file hinted at what might have truly happened. This matter intersects with higher-level operations and must remain closed for reasons of national security. In later years, Dowling would privately call it the cleanest disappearance I ever saw. No survivors, no witnesses, no paper trail. Just orders from above, silence below, and 6 names lost to history. For modern readers, the lesson is stark. In the shadow world of wartime intelligence, disappearance was sometimes the most effective form of protection, both for the mission and for those who orchestrated it. The men of Echo mission, whether victims or participants in something far larger, became ghosts in service of secrecy. But Dowling was never satisfied with the silence. Before being reassigned to North Africa, he sent a final encrypted message to Washington, recorded in OSS archives as Field Memo 417-C. Its last line read, "If Torchlight was worth their lives, someone owes them more than a classified grave." That message was never answered. And with it, the trail of Echo Mission went dark, until decades later, when declassified files would finally reveal the name Operation Torchlight once more. Nearly 3 decades after the war, in 1972, a routine declassification review at the U.S. National Archives uncovered a slim, unmarked folder buried within a collection of OSS Mediterranean records. Inside were 2 heavily redacted memoranda stamped Top Secret, Torchlight. The documents contained references to Echo Mission and Field Assets engaged in advance contact operations, Sicily, July 1943. For the first time in nearly 30 years, the vanished OSS team resurfaced, not as ghosts, but as participants in a mission so secret it had been erased from the official record. According to these fragments, Operation Torchlight was a parallel intelligence initiative launched weeks before Operation Husky. Its goal, to open communication channels with high-ranking Italian officers willing to defect before the Allied landings. The operation's existence had been concealed even from most OSS personnel in theater. Echo Mission's reconnaissance orders may have been a cover story for their true task, meeting intermediaries who could facilitate a rapid Italian surrender and prevent German reinforcements from reaching Sicily. But something had gone wrong. The documents hinted at premature compromise of field operatives due to conflicting agent loyalties, suggesting that the Sicilian intermediaries may have betrayed the Americans before the deal could be made. In simpler terms, Echo Mission may have walked straight into a trap, one designed not by the Germans, but by Italians trying to protect themselves or bargain with both sides. It was the perfect storm of double crosses and desperation, where every man involved believed he was serving his country, or saving his own skin. In 1978, historian Dr. Margaret Halley of Cambridge University obtained partial access to the declassified material and began connecting the dots. She published an article in the Journal of Military History titled, "The Net That Vanished, Echo Mission and the Torchlight Hypothesis." In it, she wrote, "The absence of evidence is, in this case, its own evidence. The precision of the erasure indicates deliberate removal, not bureaucratic neglect." Her analysis reignited public interest in the missing team, leading to a renewed search for their remains in southern Sicily. That same year, a group of Italian researchers led by Professor Carlo Bonanno visited the area near Punta Bianca, the team's presumed landing site. Divers recovered pieces of a corroded Colt .45 pistol, an American compass, and what appeared to be fragments of a waterproof map case. The artifacts were authenticated as World War II era, consistent with OSS field gear. Yet again, no bodies were found. Bonanno summarized the discovery bluntly in a press interview: "We have proof they landed. Nothing to prove they left." The new evidence deepened, rather than solved, the mystery. If the men had been captured, where were their graves? If they had defected, why did no one ever see them again? Some theorized that the OSS may have extracted any surviving agents secretly after the invasion, spiriting them away to North Africa under new identities. Others speculated they were silenced to protect the existence of Operation Torchlight, a mission whose exposure could have embarrassed both Allied and post-war intelligence agencies. Major Kenneth Dowling, long retired and living in Vermont, was interviewed in 1980 about his wartime service. He was 80 years old. When asked about Echo Mission, he hesitated before saying softly, "They did their duty. They went where we told them, and they paid the price." The truth was too big for their names to survive. It was the last recorded statement from anyone directly connected to the case. Modern historians now consider the Echo Mission one of the great unsolved disappearances of World War II. Theories range from betrayal and execution to secret extraction, or even reassignment under assumed identities. Yet, in every scenario, one detail remains constant: the deliberate effort to bury the truth. The OSS post-war successor, the CIA, has never released the full Torchlight files. Requests for declassification have been repeatedly denied, for reasons of national security. For the people of Sicily, however, the story lingers in local memory. Older residents of Agrigento still tell stories of the 6 strangers who came from the sea one night and were never seen again. Their legend blends into the landscape, part history, part whisper. Some say that during the hottest nights of summer, fishermen hear faint tapping on their radios, like a transmission from another time, lost beneath the static of history. The final pages of the declassified OSS dossier close with a single, haunting line typed in faded ink: Echo mission presumed lost in execution of torchlight objectives. Recommend no further inquiry. And so, the trail ends, not with answers, but with silence. 6 men sent into the heart of occupied Sicily vanished without a trace, leaving only fragments of paper, half-burned words, and the enduring question that has haunted intelligence historians ever since. What secret was so important that it was buried along with the men who carried it? Their story reminds us that in war, some victories are never recorded, and some truths are never meant to be found.